Cleveland never expected that massacre. In a matter of weeks, 4 families, 12 people, vanished from their own homes and reappeared dead inside abandoned houses, seated at the table as if waiting for a dinner that never began. Beside each plate, a Polaroid photograph. In the image, the victim still alive, but with the eyes erased by a single gesture. No break-in, no struggle, no explanation. Only one message sent before death. Come see the truth about yourself. Today, the investigative team reveals what no one dared to face. It wasn't about the family's deaths. It was about erasing an entire life. Part 1. It was a typical early morning in Cleveland, the kind where the city seems to turn its own sound off. In the older residential neighborhoods, the wind cut through aging trees and made tired rooftops creak, as if the houses were breathing memories no one wanted to revisit. Among them, one stood out not for its appearance but for its absence. An abandoned house forgotten on a low-traffic street, streetlight flickering, tall grass, and a gate that no longer closed properly. The report that brought the police there didn't mention screams, gunshots, or running. It spoke of something much more subtle. A light on inside a house where routine shouldn't exist. A neighbor, uneasy from the curiosity and discomfort of seeing movement where there had only been silence for years, decided to report it. It was enough for a patrol car to be sent. When the first 2 officers park in front of the property, the exterior scene doesn't suggest urgency. No forced door, no broken window, no unknown vehicle out front. The facade carries layers of peeling paint, water stains, and the kind of abandonment that makes anyone cross the street just to avoid looking at it for too long. The front door isn't locked, just resting against the frame. That's the first dissonance. When they push it open, the inside of the house returns a dense smell, a mix of old mold, damp wood, accumulated dust, and something else. It isn't the aggressive odor of a chaotic scene, but a heavy, almost sweet weight in the air, as if time had stopped there many days ago. The entry hall is empty, covered in faded wallpaper with empty frames still hanging on the wall, slight rectangles revealing where photos once hung. The main living room is a picture of resignation. A torn sofa, a rug rolled into a corner, square marks on the floor where furniture had been removed long ago. The silence is so uniform that any radio noise, any step, any breath feels intrusive, but it's the kitchen that breaks this sensation of dead neutrality. Crossing the doorway, the officers enter a space that, unlike the rest of the house, seems to have been prepared. The lighting comes from a single bulb on the ceiling, casting a steady yellow light over the center of the room. And in the center, like the heart of a carefully staged scene, there's a table. It's not fancy, nor new. It's a heavy piece made of simple wood, possibly brought from somewhere else. Around it, 4 identical chairs, aligned with precision. 3 of them are occupied. What the officers see first isn't technical detail, but the feeling. The scene resembles an interrupted dinner, except there's no food, no glasses, no silverware. There are only bodies seated, motionless, rigid, occupying those seats as if they had been placed there by force and, at the same time, with care. A man, a woman, a teenage girl. The clothes aren't torn, there are no visible signs of struggle. The bodies sit with their spines slightly collapsed, hands resting on their laps or on the table's edge. Their skin no longer reacts to the light, their muscles no longer hold weight by their own will. It's the inertia of death maintaining the composition. In front of each body, a white empty plate. To the right of each plate, a small white rectangle calling attention like a silent exclamation point. A Polaroid photograph. These photos, more than any other element, break any reading of an ordinary death. Each Polaroid shows the same person who now sits at the table. The framing is careful, centered, with lighting from inside the house. Their portraits taken right there, shortly before death. In some images, you can see the beginning of a hesitant smile. In others, a neutral look, curious, slightly suspicious. Nothing indicates that the person in the picture knew what was about to happen. Except for one detail. In every Polaroid, the eye area has been erased. Not with ink, not with scissors. The smudge has the characteristic texture of photographic emulsion still fresh, dragged by a finger. As if someone had waited for the image to appear. Watch the facial features take shape. And the moment the eyes appeared, decided to erase them. In all of them, without exception, the face keeps its outline, nose, mouth, cheeks, but the eyes are a blurry, ghostly field, existing only as suggestion. The Polaroid is not a memory. It's symbolic mutilation. On the kitchen counter to the left, there's an organized stack of cell phones. 3 devices, aligned as if collected before an event. All unlocked, all showing the same notification on the screen. A message received a few hours earlier with the same text. A short invitation, a definitive trigger. Come see the truth about yourself. A simple phrase, almost neutral to an outsider. But to someone obsessed with their own image, that phrase is a provocative mirror. A promise of revelation. A wound calling for touch. The first forensic team entering the scene notes something that is at first unsettling. There are no signs of forced entry into this family's home. No nighttime invasion, no broken doors, no forced windows, no violent entry. Records show this family left their home willingly. No neighbor heard screams, arguments, running. There are no reports of kidnapping, no strange cars seen pushing anyone inside by force. They went there, voluntarily, as if they had scheduled a time, day, and place for an ordinary appointment, as if they were going to a photo shoot, to a different experience, to a family outing. Later that morning, in another part of the city, a pattern begins forming before anyone can connect it yet. In a second residential neighborhood, another abandoned house, another neighbor bothered by lights on, another call, another house that shouldn't have movement, but does. The same feeling of an uninhabited exterior, the same door without invasion marks, the same dense, stale smell accumulating in hallways not meant to receive footsteps for years. In the kitchen of this second address, the choreography repeats with small variations that only accentuate the planning. Another table, another set of 4 chairs, 3 more bodies seated, a father, a mother, a child slightly younger this time. In front of each one, again, empty plates. Beside each plate, the same small white rectangle. Freshly developed Polaroids, resting like distorted ID cards. Again, the erased eyes. Again, grouped cell phones displaying the same invitation. The differences between the houses are merely architectural. In one, the wall covering still holds. In another, the plaster shows through. In one, the table is rectangular. In another, slightly oval. But the language of the scene is identical. Someone is using dead spaces in the city as frames for a ritual. As the hours pass, Cleveland shifts from uneasy to restless. What began as 2 isolated calls becomes a sequence. In a third part of the city, a third abandoned house reveals once again the same signature. 3 bodies at the table, 1 empty chair, Polaroids with smudged eyes, cell phones gathered with the same invitation. 12 bodies, 4 families, 3 dead per family. The fact that the scenes are so clean, no apparent struggle, no destruction, no sign of improvisation, indicates something the local team senses even before detailed reports. This sequence of crimes is not the result of impulse, but of method. Not uncontrolled eruption, but calculated ritual. The constant presence of the 4th empty chair is a silent irony. It's always there, positioned, pulled back, as if someone had just stood up and stepped away moments before the police arrived. Or as if it were symbolically reserved for someone who never sits, an absent observer, an author who refuses to appear in their own work. In the victim's digital records, a pattern begins to emerge even before specialized units arrive. All 4 families were active on social media. Organized profiles, good lighting photos, motivational captions, constant posts of lunches, trips, celebrations. Their public image was coherent, polished, almost exemplary. The kitchens of these abandoned houses, however, display the opposite, a place of non-belonging. The wood on the table has no marks of everyday use, the plates don't show silverware scratches, the walls carry scars of moisture, the lighting has no warmth of home. It's a house without memory being used to stage the final memory of people who never lived there. The message, "Come see the truth about yourself," appears not only as text, but as thesis. It's the silent manifesto of someone at war with what people pretend to be. Someone using the language of photography, instant, physical, irreversible, to announce the end of any possibility of posing. For those who examine the Polaroids closely, a subtle detail emerges. The smudge over the eyes is not crude. It's not the gesture of explosive anger. It's precise, controlled. The finger dragging the emulsion doesn't destroy the whole face, doesn't erase the outline, doesn't tear the surface. It only removes the gaze, as if the author were saying the rest can exist here. Clothes, framing, but the identity, the self that looks back, doesn't deserve to survive. News of the 4 scenes spreads in a matter of hours. The press captures fragments, abandoned houses, serial crime, dead families, mysterious photographs. Fear takes a specific shape, the fear that what looks perfect can suddenly be summoned to face an immutable version of itself. When the case reaches federal levels, it doesn't come with the usual line, "We have no leads," but with something more unsettling. We have many images but no explanation. A killer who doesn't invade homes, doesn't break doors, doesn't leave walls destroyed, but manages to make entire families sit at tables that don't belong to them, in houses never part of their routines. A killer who doesn't seem to chase bodies. He chases displays. And by erasing them, he turns Cleveland into the setting of an album no one wanted to assemble, an album of entire families fixed at their final table, under the harsh light of a truth revealed by someone who has no face yet, but already has a signature. The signature is in the Polaroids, in the erased eyes, in the promise of showing a truth no one asked to see. And it's at this intersection between image, lie, control, and death that the Mindtrace Division will be called in. Because here, what bleeds isn't the scene. It's the concept of a perfect family. Part 2. The official summons arrives at the Mindtrace Division headquarters at 6:17 a.m., just a few hours after the 4th scene has been confirmed in Cleveland. The preliminary dossier, sent with top priority, contains photographs of the scenes, initial reports from local police, and a summary that, at first read, already makes one thing clear. This is not an ordinary crime. It is not a random sequence. It is not the work of someone disorganized. It is a discourse built with the dead. The division's briefing room is designed to decode behavior before decoding crimes. Dim lighting, walls lined with digital panels, synchronized monitors, tables that automatically rearrange themselves according to the team's needs. That morning, the 3 members of the unit, Liz Murray, Jay Carter, and Mark Henderson, gather without their usual preliminary small talk. The case demands technical silence before any speculation. The first images projected on the big screen show a repeating pattern. 4 abandoned houses in different neighborhoods, all turned into sets for the same visual composition. Liz studies the tables with almost surgical attention. The placement of the chairs, the distances, the geometry of the bodies, everything reveals intention. Nothing suggests improvisation. The Polaroid, in every scene, appears as the central element. Jay adjusts the zoom on one of the images, enlarging the smudged area where the eyes of the victim still alive at the moment of the click should be. There are no tears, no ink overlay, just the dragging of a finger over still wet emulsion, a movement that requires precision, timing, and familiarity with the analog process. For Mindtrace, this detail is crucial. The choice of Polaroid isn't aesthetic, it's functional. It's a technology that doesn't allow later editing, that returns the image raw, that requires physical presence, that produces an instant and definitive result. A killer who chooses this medium is saying something about control and about truth. They don't want to alter the photo afterward, they want to destroy the gaze the moment it's born. Mark analyzes the table from the first scene. He points to the empty chair, always positioned as if someone had just stood up. This recurring absence functions as a symbolic presence. In signature crimes, absences are as important as presences. The empty chair, repeated 4 times, is the author's invisible portrait. They place themselves in the scene without showing their face. Liz revisits the victims' profiles. All 4 families had an active presence on social media, recent professional photos, frequent posts about achievements, trips, school events, holidays. In all of them, the public narrative is coherent, bright, staged. She walks among the projected images, analyzing the repeated aesthetic: happy families in perfect composition, soft lighting, rehearsed poses. Nothing there looks casual. Nothing looks spontaneous. The perpetrator seems to have a thesis. The perfect family is a myth that deserves to be dismantled. The message found on the phones, "Come see the truth about yourself," appears on the main briefing screen. Jay suggests that the phrase doesn't just serve as a summons, but as psychological provocation. It specifically activates profiles that are narcissistically sensitive to their own image, people who need to see themselves reflected in a flattering way, and who therefore become vulnerable when someone promises to show something truer. The phrase, Liz assesses, is an offensive mirror, an attack on visual pride. Next, the neighborhood maps are projected. Mark connects the 4 addresses with digital lines. The abandoned houses don't follow a logical route. They're scattered across points that don't form a geographic pattern, but do form a symbolic one. They are all homes that lost their family function years ago. Empty structures that were once households and now are storage spaces for absence. For someone who grew up in a false home, this kind of ruin might have deep emotional meaning, a sort of perfect stage to reveal the distorted truth they believe exists in the families they photograph. Jay returns to the Polaroids. He asks to display them all together, 4 families on a split screen. The smudge over the eyes becomes even more disturbing when repeated 12 times. He points out something you only notice when you look at them as a group. The smudge doesn't just hide the eyes, it removes the ability to look back. It's as if the perpetrator were saying, "You won't see anything. I'm the one who sees." This kind of gesture reveals someone who struggles with their own visual identity, possibly someone who grew up being seen in a way that didn't match what they felt. It's the kind of trauma that produces adults obsessed with narrative control. And adults like that, when in conflict with their own story, may try to fix the world by repeating in others the suffering they endured. Liz then writes 3 words on the interactive board: image, truth, death. She explains, these families weren't chosen at random. They represent edited versions of themselves. Death for the perpetrator doesn't seem to be the primary focus, but the consequence of a prior act, the dismantling of an image. He doesn't punish people. He punishes representations. The team begins reviewing older photos from professional sessions some of the victims took part in. They appear to have been directed by experienced photographers. In some of them, it's possible to notice techniques that recall specific styles. Jay suggests that before killing, the perpetrator may have been a photographer, professional, or amateur with a history of shooting families. Mark adds, the perpetrator isn't just criticizing photography, he's confronting something personal. Family photographs are often the only public proof that a given family was happy. When that happiness never truly existed, the photo becomes a cruel reminder. Someone who grew up in that kind of environment could see Polaroids as the perfect weapon, a way to create the final picture that can never be contested. The next projection shows interior images of the abandoned houses before the crimes. Empty living rooms, kitchens consumed by water damage, marks on the floor where furniture once stood. Mindtrace realizes the perpetrator didn't choose these houses randomly. He selects them like someone selecting studios. The natural light, the structure, the position of the table, everything points to someone who understands visual composition. Someone who sees each property as a set and each victim as an element in the frame. When the briefing ends, there is a provisional but powerful conclusion. The perpetrator doesn't kill to hide anything. He kills to show. He doesn't kill out of impulse. He kills out of distorted conviction. He doesn't invade homes. He invites people. He doesn't slip up. He corrects, according to his own sick logic. Liz closes with a sentence that defines the axis of the case. He's not erasing eyes. He's erasing versions of himself. Cleveland now isn't just facing a killer. It's facing someone who believes he's revealing the truth. Part 3. Mindtrace begins its initial analysis with a simple but decisive principle. When a criminal doesn't invade homes and still manages to lead entire families into abandoned locations, his weapon isn't force, it's narrative. It's not explicit violence, it's psychological seduction. It's not threat, it's promise. This is the first point the team places on the table. 1. The paradox of voluntary families. On the interactive board, Jay Carter draws a circle and writes inside it, "They went there on their own." The sentence seems banal, but it holds the core of the investigation. Families do not move together to isolated places without reason, especially to abandoned houses, environments naturally associated with danger, filth, and discomfort. If they went, it's because something felt legitimate, felt safe, felt important, felt intimate. The message found on the phones, "Come see the truth about yourself," was the final trigger. But it wasn't the initial invitation. It was the closing of a persuasion process. Mindtrace knows how to recognize when a phrase is a symbol and not a conversation. No one leaves home with the entire family just because a stranger sends a provocative sentence. There was prior contact. There was building of trust. There was construction of expectation. Someone promised something that to these families felt irresistible, and when analyzing their profiles, the reason begins to emerge. 2. The digital reflection. Liz projects onto the screens a collage of the victims' public posts, travel photos, selfies at celebrations, short videos showing moments of spontaneous happiness that were carefully choreographed. The families had consistent digital presence. They weren't influencers, but they were proud of their own image. They knew how to photograph themselves, how to pose, how to show off. For the team, this is essential. People who value their own image have 2 weaknesses. 1. The desire to look even better. 2. The fear of looking worse than they present. The killer understood this deeply. He didn't offer danger. He offered an upgrade. 3. The photographer hypothesis. Jay raises the most evident possibility. The perpetrator is or was a professional photographer or an amateur with advanced technique. This hypothesis is supported by several elements. The use of the Polaroid with full mastery of the timing between revelation and smudge. The perfect framing of the victims before death. The composition of the tables as directed scenes. The use of the houses as natural studios. The precise repetition of the ritual across 4 different environments. The team doesn't see improvisation, they see direction. Mark highlights something subtle on the victim's table. The distance between plate, photo, and hands is similar in all scenes. That requires more than intention, it requires practice. This millimetric repetition is from someone used to positioning people for static captures. This is not the modus operandi of an impulsive aggressor. It's the behavior of someone accustomed to controlling environments, bodies, and poses. The perpetrator doesn't kill quickly, he composes. 4. The meaning of the empty chair. All scenes have 4 chairs. Only 3 are occupied. The 4th is always empty, slightly pulled back, as if someone had gotten up, or as if someone were meant for that spot but never showed up. Liz interprets the symbol. The empty chair is the perpetrator, but it's also what's missing in him. It is an unoccupied presence, a space suggesting someone who grew up feeling outside their own family. The 4th place represents his absence in the portrait of the perfect family. It's the mark of someone who sees himself as excluded from the album. The repetition of this chair in 4 different houses indicates the killer isn't just repeating a crime, he's reconstructing a personal narrative. 5. The Polaroid as a psychological weapon. The Polaroid, analyzed alone, is just an instant photograph, but to the perpetrator, it's much more. It is the symbolic centerpiece. Mindtrace interprets its functions. 1. Captures the moment of trust. The victims are not terrified in the photo. They are posing. They are alive. They are yielding. 2. Freezes the narrative. A Polaroid cannot be edited or corrected. It is the opposite of digital photography and the opposite of the carefully edited life on social media. 3. destroys the gaze. Smudging only the eyes is a cold, calculated, symbolic act. It removes identity. It erases the return of the gaze. It denies humanity without touching the body. 4. Ensures final control. The perpetrator chooses the victim's last image and destroys the part that most defined their public identity, the gaze directed at the world. 6. The message, not a threat, but a mirror. Come see the truth about yourself. Liz analyzes the phrase as if it were a diagnosis. It is direct, intriguing, provocative, narcissistically efficient. The sentence works as bait for people who believe there is indeed a deeper, more honest, more special version of themselves waiting to be revealed. When someone with narcissistic traits receives an invitation suggesting intimate revelation, curiosity beats fear. Jay adds, "This phrase doesn't promise danger. It promises authenticity. And for someone living in search of the perfect image, that's almost a religious ritual." 7. The house is anti-home. All the houses used were abandoned, worn out, devoid of family memory. For Mindtrace, this is no coincidence. It is symbolism. These houses represent the opposite of what the families displayed online. Colorless, loveless, storyless, narrativeless, lifeless. The perpetrator chooses dead spaces to reveal what he believes is the true face of the families: absence. He takes artificial homes, the ones on social media, and destroys them symbolically within homes that never existed. 8. Death as consequence, not objective. The body's positions and absence of graphic violence suggest death is not the central focus. It is the conclusion of a psychological process. The real aggression occurs earlier, when the victims realize too late that they have no control over their own image. Liz summarizes, "He kills to close the scene, not to start the crime." This places the perpetrator in the profile of a ritualistic killer who doesn't seek direct gratification from the act of killing, but from the aesthetic control that leads to the final moment. 9. The perpetrator's cognitive structure. Based on observed patterns, the team outlines the first traits of the killer: likely background in photography, high level of technical skill, identity shaped by distorted family images, resentment tied to the idea of the perfect family, need for symbolic control, tendency to see life as visual composition, internal trauma related to self-image, impulse to correct, not merely destroy. Jay adds, "He's not someone trying to eliminate victims. He's someone trying to eliminate illusions," Mark concludes, and he wants the last image to be his, not the family's. 10. Initial analysis, conclusion. Mindtrace closes the phase with 3 certainties. 1. The killer operates with method, not impulse. 2. He seduces before he kills. He doesn't capture, he convinces. 3. He believes he is correcting something deeply wrong in the world. And above all, he is staging his own pain, repeating it until someone reads it. Part 4. Mindtrace begins the full reconstruction of events by following the path in reverse. It does not start from the death, but from the first contact. To understand how the families voluntarily arrived at the abandoned houses, it is necessary to understand the emotional and logistical path that led them there. The 3 agents know that ritualistic crimes rarely begin at the place of death. They begin in the perpetrator's mind long before, sometimes weeks, months, years earlier. 1. The invisible first contact. Jay begins tracking old messages from the victims, not just the last ones, but all those that might point to the start of the approach. In each family, he finds a pattern. The initial contact was not threatening, nor mysterious. It was professional. In one family, an email offered a unique photo shoot to capture the true family essence. In another, a direct message on social media praised the authenticity that shines through each photo you post, suggesting a unique opportunity in Cleveland to capture something truly sincere. These messages had no grammar errors, no alarming tone, no strange requests. They appeared to come from someone with mastery of visual language, someone who knows how to speak to clients who value image. The attached portfolios were real well-produced photos taken years before, likely from a period when the perpetrator still worked in the traditional market. The killer did not create a complete lie. He recycled his own history. 2. The invitation that breaks defenses. Liz notes that all the messages contained a calculated psychological element, a specific compliment, something like, "You seem to have a rare family connection. You all give off an energy few people have. It would be incredible to capture the truth your family carries." These compliments activate the sense of idealized identity. They produce emotional dopamine. They create the feeling that someone sees the family better than they see themselves. For people who invest time in constructing a public image, this is irresistible. The perpetrator then offers what they want most: aesthetic recognition, a chance to become even more themselves. This is the entry point. He never mentions danger, mystery, or urgency. He offers an experience. And experiences generate psychological openness. 3. Scheduling the photo shoot. Mark notes that, in the victim's calendars, the scheduled times coincide with periods of low activity. By analyzing their movements, it becomes clear the perpetrator chose days and hours during which it would be unlikely for witnesses to be nearby. The locations, the abandoned houses, are presented as artistic locations, chosen to represent a contrast between internal truth and external decay. The killer uses language typical of conceptual photographers, transforming repulsive environments into deep spaces. For families seeking photos that look more authentic, this concept is appealing. He transforms imperfection into art. He transforms ruin into aesthetic. Liz highlights, he sells decay as poetry, and poetry convinces. 4. Arrival at the house. The victim's reconstructed paths indicate none of them found the deteriorated facade strange. The perpetrator likely prepared them in advance, saying, "The magic is inside, not outside." He guides the families to the kitchen, the most symbolic space of a home. He chooses this room because the kitchen is the emotional center of the house, even in ruins. Mindtrace mentally recreates the moment. The door opens, the air smells of time standing still. But a table is already positioned, chairs aligned, the scene ready. Nothing is improvised. Nothing is spontaneous. Mark identifies a pattern of staging. The perpetrator leads the victims onto a stage where they do not know they are already characters. He neutralizes suspicion with technical explanations. I want side lighting. I want geometric composition. I need strong emotional contrast. The authority of someone who masters the visual scene reassures them. He positions himself as a director, and directors are rarely questioned. 5. The surrendering of phones. The victim's phones were left on the counter. This didn't happen by force. It was suggested and accepted. The likely phrase used, "To capture your true connection, I need nothing interfering." Parents and children understand this as part of the artistic process. It is not strange to hand over phones during a photo shoot. Many photographers request this. Mindtrace recognizes, this is the moment the perpetrator cuts their link to the outside world. After this, the families depend entirely on him. They don't realize it, but they are isolated. 6. The broken portrait. The killer positions each family member in a specific chair. He adjusts light, angles, heights. The victim's final posture indicates they were following instructions. There is no rigidity of fear. There is rigidity of pose. The Polaroid enters the scene as part of the process. He takes a quick instant photo to see how it's coming out. The click happens. He holds the photo, waves it, waits a few seconds. The victims likely watch with curiosity. Maybe they smile. Maybe they comment. The moment the image appears, he drags his finger across the eyes. He doesn't show the photo to anyone. Liz explains, this is the moment of rupture. He destroys the gaze at the moment it is born. In this gesture, the perpetrator completes the first stage of the ritual, erasing the victim's public version. 7. The false interval. The bodies show no signs of struggle. This indicates the immobilization method is silent and fast. Mindtrace does not speculate about the mechanism of death that belongs to forensic examination, but identifies something more important. The perpetrator leads the victims into a vulnerable state before death. They still believe they are in a photo shoot. The empty plate placed in front of each person reinforces the idea of a home that doesn't exist. It is part of the staging. There is no meal. There is only the appearance of one. He constructs what he never had. A family seated at the table. The table becomes an altar. The plates become symbols. The Polaroids become silent epitaphs. 8. The empty chair as a blade. The fourth CRUELTY empty is left, slightly pulled back. It is never aligned. This is not accidental. Mindtrace interprets this element as an autobiographical mark. The chair is the absence of the perpetrator in his own family. The chair is his position as eternal observer. The chair is proof he never belonged to the scenes he photographed. The chair is the place he didn't have and now imposes on the victims. Mark says, it's the perpetrator saying, I see you, but you don't see me. 9. The final moment. The perpetrator finishes staging the scene before the death. He does nothing afterward. This explains why the bodies look arranged but not manipulated post-mortem. Death is the final invisible click. The final scene is prepared beforehand. He steps away from the table, observes, touches nothing else. Death, therefore, becomes closure, not fulfillment. 10. The return to the world. After the ritual, he collects the camera, organizes the phones, wipes digital traces, and leaves the house without hurry, without breaking anything, without disorder. He closes the door as if it were just another workday. Mindtrace realizes the perpetrator does not flee. He concludes. He does not erase evidence. He arranges it. He does not destroy the scene. He presents it. He believes each scene is a work of art, and works of art are meant to be found. Part 5. The Mindtrace Division begins drafting the psychological profile of the perpetrator, not from what he did, but from what he tried to communicate. In this case, the crime is not just an action. It is a thesis. A silent manifesto made of improvised tables, aligned chairs, empty plates, cell phones disconnected from the world, and Polaroids with erased eyes. Each element functions as a fragment of the criminal's mind. The team knows the true signature is not in how he killed, but in how he staged. 1. The wounded narcissistic core. Liz starts by describing the basic structure of the perpetrator's personality. A deep, yet deformed narcissism. Not the classic narcissism of explicit grandiosity, but narcissism built out of humiliation. This type of individual was not born believing he was special. He was forced to appear special. The family environment that shapes this kind of psychology is marked by contradictions. Parents who demand perfection but offer no emotional stability. Families who smile in public photos while exchanging aggression in private. This contrast creates a permanent internal fracture in the child. The world demands a perfect version. Life delivers a chaotic experience. The body feels pain. The image says everything is fine. This dissonance isn't understood. It's swallowed. Over time, the child learns that their social function is not to be but to seem. That their pain is a noise that must be muted. That their identity must be molded to fit a family portrait that doesn't correspond to the truth. This emotional formation creates a narcissist who is not glamorous but resentful, someone who hates what they see because they know what is displayed never matches what is lived. 2. Photography as mask and weapon. At some point in life, the perpetrator discovers photography. Not by chance, but by necessity. Photographing offers control over what has always been disordered. In photography, he can decide where the light falls, decide what must appear, decide which angle is acceptable, decide what is hidden, decide which version will be eternal. The camera is the first tool that allows him to choose the truth even if the truth is fabricated. That's why he becomes a family photographer. Not out of love for the art, but out of psychological compulsion. By directing happy families, he relives the theater he took part in during childhood. By framing fake smiles, he recognizes his own trauma repeated in others. The studio becomes an inverted mirror. Every portrait he builds rekindles his internal lie. An individual with this structure cannot endure the endless repetition of falseness. Eventually, frustration begins to ferment. The photographer stops wanting to record happiness. He starts wanting to expose it. He starts wanting to correct it. He starts wanting to punish that which, to him, never truly existed. 3. Hatred for the family image. The choice of victims confirms this psychological evolution. The perpetrator does not choose isolated individuals. He doesn't choose couples in conflict. He doesn't choose discrete families. He chooses families that project perfection. He splits his hatred on two fronts. 1. Hatred for what they show because they represent what he has always known to be a lie. 2. Hatred for what he himself helped build, because he, as a photographer, was an accomplice to false narratives. Liz identifies a common phenomenon in profiles like this. The perpetrator is not just killing families, he is destroying symbols. For him, each family is a frame that must be broken. Each table is a stage to dismantle the lie of perfect coexistence. Each Polaroid is a direct blow to the myth of the image. Death, in this context, is not the focus. It is the final result of the dismantling. The perpetrator does not kill because he wants to kill. He kills because he believes he is correcting a mistake, the mistake of appearance. 4. The ritual of the erased gaze. Nothing reveals more about the perpetrator than the smudge over the eyes. This is not aesthetics, it is pure psychology. Eyes have universal symbolic meaning. They are the doorway to identity. They are the point of contact with the other. They are the visible manifestation of emotion. They are the mirror of repressed truth. Erasing them, therefore, has intense psychological depth. Mark explains, anyone who erases eyes is erasing existence. This repeated gesture indicates the perpetrator cannot tolerate the victim's gaze. He cannot tolerate the gaze of families that represent what his family was not. He cannot tolerate the gaze that reflects back what he hates in himself. By erasing the eyes, he does two things at once. 1. Erases the victim's humanity. 2. Erases his own traumatic memory associated with the gaze of the false family he grew up with. It is an attempt to rewrite his identity through the symbolic elimination of the other's gaze. 5. The abandoned house as self-portrait. The houses chosen for the crimes are not just convenient locations. They are symbols. The perpetrator could kill anywhere, but he chooses dead houses, houses with no memory, empty houses, houses that once were homes, but now are nothing. These houses represent his destroyed past, his sense of non-belonging, his relationship with the concept of home, the emotional ruin of his original family. In these houses, he recreates what he never had, a table where everyone sits 7, if already dead. That table is his family, finally immobilized, finally silent, finally consistent with his trauma. There are no screams, no arguments, no fake smiles. The perfect family only exists like this, dead, motionless, without a gaze. 6. The fourth chair, the absence. He stages. The empty chair is the epicenter of the psychological profile. It is him. It is the place he occupied in childhood, present yet invisible. It is the emotional position he has held his entire life, inside yet outside. It is the space he wanted to fill but never could. It is proof that he sees himself as the ghost of the original family. By leaving the fourth chair empty, he sets the scene to reinforce his role in the world. I was here. I have always been here. But no one saw me. The chair is his most intimate signature. It is where he places himself in the scene without appearing. 7. The myth of truth as justification. The message sent to the victims, "Come see the truth about yourself," is an internal mantra for the perpetrator. He genuinely believes he is revealing something. He is not a simple liar or classic manipulator. He operates within a psychological system he considers real. To the perpetrator, public image is a lie, family is theater, photography is a mask. Death is the only sincere portrait. He concludes distortedly that he is freeing the victims from the illusion they created. To him, erasing the eyes is revealing the truth, that behind every perfect family there is something rotten. This thought is not impulsive. It is structured. It is a personal doctrine. 8. Moralized delusion. There are elements of moralized delusion in the perpetrator's behavior. Not necessarily psychosis, but distorted conviction. He believes he is doing aesthetic justice. He believes the image must be corrected. He doesn't see himself as a killer. He sees himself as someone who exposes what others hide. This type of thinking is common in individuals with narcissistic personality disorders, obsessive-compulsive traits, a history of domestic humiliation, untreated trauma, fixation on the gaze as an instrument of control, inability to integrate emotional past and present. 9. The moment of rupture. Liz proposes a crucial point. At some moment, the perpetrator stopped merely photographing families. He began judging each family he photographed. He began to feel disgust toward the work he did. He began to recognize in his clients fragments of his own story. This is the moment he leaves the market. He doesn't explode. He doesn't attack anyone. He simply withdraws, silently. And in silence, his mind reorganizes photography from tool to symbolic weapon. He realizes he can correct the photo he never managed to tear up, the album of his own childhood. 10. The consolidated profile Mindtrace concludes the profile. Man between 30 and 45 years old. History and family photography, with silent professional ruptures. Childhood marked by a structurally false family. Wounded narcissism with symbolic, not physical, sadistic traits. Obsession with image control. Fixation on erasing the gaze. Deep emotional bond with the idea of the perfect family. Internalized resentment transformed into aesthetic ritual. Desire to correct the past by recreating scenes of truth through death. This is the man they are looking for. A killer willing not to destroy lives, but to destroy poses. A photographer who stopped recording the world and started rewriting his own story. Part 6. From the first day in Cleveland, Mindtrace knows that a killer with such a striking signature would inevitably ignite two dangerous reactions in the city: paranoia and imitation. When crimes carry a strong symbolic weight, society responds by creating distorted versions, improvised suspects, and theories that multiply faster than real evidence. It is in this chaotic terrain that false leads begin to emerge, not only confusing the investigation, but revealing the psychological impact the case has on the population. The first name raised by local police seemed promising. A family event photographer who had gotten into public arguments with clients and posted inflammatory criticism on social media about fake families pretending to love each other for photos. At first glance, he was almost too perfect not to investigate. His history included aggressive messages to former clients, posts about hating family photo shoots, colleagues mentioning his obsession with visual falseness. Mindtrace schedules a full analysis. But as Jay reviews his photo shoots, he notices something fundamental. They're chaotic. He has no command of composition, no control of lighting, no repetition of patterns. He is too impulsive, not aesthetic enough. His work does not carry the ritualistic coldness of the crime. It carries raw, disorganized anger. Liz adds, "He hates, but he doesn't understand, and our perpetrator understands deeply." The suspect is dismissed. The initial noise, however, opens the door to a wave of new unfounded accusations. Days later, another potential connection surfaces: an underground art collective known for installations criticizing the traditional family structure. In some conceptual photo shoots, members of the group used white paint to cover the eyes of figures in images, a gesture disturbingly similar to the Polaroid smudges. Police, pressured by the media, nearly conclude they've found the culprit. But Mindtrace sees further. Mark reviews the collective's portfolio. Each piece, although provocative, has a different purpose: questioning social norms, not destroying people. The symbolism is political, not personal. The aesthetics are performative, not ritualistic. What's missing is the defining mark of the real killer: biographical coherence. Liz explains, "They stage a concept. Our perpetrator stages pain. The collective is nothing more than social echo and aesthetic coincidence, not a psychological connection." On the third day, police receive an anonymous call. A man claiming to be the killer. He describes details that sound convincing: the number of Polaroids, the smudged eyes, the chairs, the empty plates. The press leaks the information and creates instant frenzy. Comments multiply. He confessed. He's a disturbed artist. They finally found him. But Mindtrace maintains a basic principle. Ritualistic criminals rarely confess spontaneously. They believe in their work, and those who believe do not draw attention to themselves. Jay analyzes the recording. In less than 2 minutes, he identifies that everything the confessor mentioned had already been revealed by the media. Nothing he said was exclusive. Nothing was deep. Nothing was intimate. He was just an imitator trying to assume a role that wasn't his. The man is located and interrogated. He turns out to be someone seeking attention, emotionally fragile, but incapable of committing crimes with that level of organization. Another false lead archived. A more alarming event occurs on the 4th day. A small photography studio is found with its doors broken and walls covered in red paint. On one wall, the phrase, "I only reveal the truth." The symbolism is so direct it seems logical to connect it to the killer. Journalists arrive before the police. The city panics. Fear becomes narrative, but the patterns don't match. Mark reviews the neighborhood security footage. The culprit isn't a methodical adult, but an agitated teenager, driven not by ritualistic purpose, but by unresolved grief. His uncle had been murdered in an unrelated case, and he had projected his pain onto any authority figure associated with images. The gesture, though violent, is impulsive, the opposite of the real perpetrator. Liz emphasizes, the killer doesn't protest. He doesn't shout. He doesn't beg to be seen. He lets himself be found when he's ready. The vandalism is nothing more than a social reaction to the climate of fear. Among so many dismissed leads, a curious pattern begins to emerge. In every studio investigated, old documents, schedules, and archives reveal a name that appears repeatedly, but always in the past. A photographer who once worked with several families in the region, but who left all jobs without open conflict. He did not argue. He did not explode. He did not cause crises. He simply disappeared. When Mindtrace attempts to pull recent records, they find silence. No updated address. No recent portfolio, no new clients, no professional records, no active digital presence. It is the perfect absence. Absence too perfect to ignore. Cross-checking the data, Liz notices something that shifts the entire investigative axis. Of the 4 families found dead, 3 had something in common. Years earlier, at different times, all had participated in photo shoots conducted by this same missing photographer. They didn't know each other. They didn't share social circles. They were unaware of the coincidence, but they had all, at some point, been framed through the same lens. This discovery is not a coincidence. It is the kind of silent pattern that connects past and present. Jay states he returned to his own works, and he corrected them. This changes everything. The team continues evaluating the list of families who once hired this photographer. But then a new difficulty emerges. He photographed many, hundreds of sessions over the years, diverse families, different styles. Now the false lead flips. Which family will be next? Which of them fits the perpetrator's emotional pattern? Which are just noise? Which are just innocent past? Mindtrace realizes not all are targets. The perpetrator is not killing everyone he ever photographed. He is choosing those who now represent his trauma with the greatest intensity, those who perform perfection online. The past does not define the choice. The current image does. Digital narcissism selects. After the public announcement that the killer may be a photographer, the entire city goes on alert. And alert generates chaos. Clients accusing photographers over rude comments, studios receiving threats, amateurs offering free shoots being reported as suspects, visual artists being harassed by neighbors. Mindtrace filters dozens of irrelevant reports. Cleveland becomes a broken mirror, with each fragment reflecting a possible culprit. But none of them fit the emotional architecture of the true perpetrator. After days filtering imitation, impulsivity, protest, misdirected anger, and emotional vandalism, Mindtrace realizes what distinguishes the real killer. He does not act out of explosive rage. He does not seek public attention. He does not leave messages indicating despair. He does not try to look like an artist. He does not confess. He does not slip. His crime is a construction, a composition, a ritual. The false leads, instead of delaying the investigation, end up doing the opposite. They reveal by contrast the perpetrator's precision. By the end of the 6th part, only one line remains solid. The perpetrator returned to the families he once photographed not to remember them, but to destroy them. He does not want the past. He wants the present reflection. And now, with the name of a photographer who vanished from the city and who silently intersects the history of 3 of the 4 murdered families, Mindtrace realizes that none of the false leads led them astray. They led them to him. Part 7. Mindtrace reaches the 7th stage of the investigation with a pile of discarded noise, failed suspects, excessive coincidences, and an entire city searching for culprits where there is no method. But it is precisely in this chaos that the real pattern emerges. As always, the crucial discovery does not come from what was missing. It comes from what was in front of them from the beginning, repeated in silence, waiting to be read with the right lens. Jay revisits the missing photographer's past with greater depth. He cross-references old contract records, tax reports, digital archives, and printing service receipts. In one of the folders recovered from a studio the perpetrator frequented years earlier, there is something strange. A set of Polaroids that shouldn't exist. They were taken during professional photo shoots, but Polaroid is not a tool used in modern commercial sessions. It was a personal habit, perhaps a private register, perhaps a symbolic addiction. And in them, Jay finds something that freezes the room. The people's eyes are intact, but his are not. In several old photos, the photographer himself appears reflected on surfaces, windows, mirrors, glass doors, and in all of them, his reflection is smudged, always over the eyes. The same drag, the same gesture, the same pattern. Mark reads it instantly. He started by erasing himself. Before destroying the victim's gaze, he destroyed his own. Before killing families, he erased reflections. Before performing the ritual, he rehearsed internally what he hated to see. The signature already existed. He only externalized it years later. Liz dives into the list of old clients. She notices something that had slipped by because of the volume. The 4 murdered families are not connected only by the past. They had all booked sessions with him during moments of family crisis, something that did not show on social media. Searching old message archives, Liz finds phrases that, at the time, seemed purely professional. We want photos that show we're okay. We need to look united for an important announcement. It's a difficult moment, we can adjust that in the pictures, right? These families were asking to be emotionally edited. They sought photography as cement for a fractured home, exactly like the assassin's family did in his childhood. Mark concludes, he recognized in them the same mechanism he was a victim of. The photographer did not choose them randomly. He chose those who repeated the emotional theater that shaped his pain. One step further, Jay discovers an encrypted file in the old computer recovered from a storage unit. The file is named Raw Memories. When decoded, it reveals a list of addresses, the dead houses, the future tables, places marked with planned dates long before the crimes were discovered. The revelation is brutal. The 4 houses had been selected long before the murders. The killer did not improvise locations. He prepared his emotional map months earlier. Each abandoned house corresponds to a specific period of his life. The first, near the school he attended. The second, close to the home of relatives he lived with after domestic fights. The third, a few blocks from the church where his family posed as an example. the fourth less than 500 meters from the house he lived in until age 12. Liz interprets it with surgical precision. He did not choose the houses based on the victims. He chose the victims based on the houses. The families were pieces fitted into the intimate board of his history. Mark performs a deeper technical analysis of the photos. The smudged emulsion over the eyes leaves slight digital traces, indications of natural skin oil, incomplete but repeated fingerprints. Comparing them to materials found in the old studio, Jay confirms the inevitable. The fingerprints belong to the missing photographer. There is no room for doubt. The perpetrator left his signature not out of carelessness but out of ritual logic. Erasing eyes is erasing the self. Leaving his mark is asserting control. The killer wanted someone to finally see the truth, his truth. In the middle of this convergence of clues, something even bigger surfaces. Liz finds in one of the files a phrase repeated across different documents, handwritten or typed, subtly changing over the years. One day, no one will look at me anymore. One day, no one should have to look at me. One day, I will erase what should never have existed. Over time, the phrase evolves, becoming more cruel. One day, no one will have eyes to lie. This is the turning point for Mindtrace. The perpetrator does not only hate the gaze, he hates the act of looking. He hates the human reflection. He hates the exchange the gaze creates. The message, "Come see the truth about yourself," gains new meaning. He is not offering revelation. He is offering ruin. The final discovery happens when Mark projects all abandoned houses selected by the perpetrator and notices a fifth location marked still unused. An even older house, in the process of demolition, in a neighborhood that has already lost half of its original residences. In the yard of that house, according to old records, there was a large wooden table, mentioned in aerial photos. A table with 8 seats, bigger, more symbolic, more definitive. The team understands. The killer is not finished. The next scene is ready. He prepared it years ago. The table waits. The empty chair is already positioned. With all pieces assembled, Liz synthesizes the final truth. He never hunted people. He hunted versions of himself. Each family was a mirror. Each table was a memory. Each Polaroid was regression to childhood. Each erased gaze was self-annihilation. And then she speaks the phrase that finally shapes the enigma. He's not killing families. He's erasing portraits. At the end of the analysis, Jay pulls the last record found, a service contract 10 years old. Signed by Elias Hargrove, Cleveland photographer, missing for 3 years. No farewell, no registered death, no new work, no new life. Mindtrace not only knows who he is, they know where he'll be. They know what he'll do. They know which family is next. They know which table awaits him. And the episode enters, at last, the phase where truth and confrontation draw near. Part 8. Mindtrace reaches the 8th stage knowing they are no longer dealing merely with the investigation of a crime, but with the inevitable collision between a broken mind and the truth it has been trying to hide. The name now has a face, even if that face exists in no photograph. Elias Hargrove, former family photographer, disappeared from the world before disappearing from himself. The team must reach him before the 5th scene is completed. There is no time to wait, no margin for error. The confrontation will not be physical, it will be psychological, symbolic, mental. The house destined for the 5th ritual sits in a nearly abandoned neighborhood, where more windows are boarded up than open to daylight. Time there seems to have given up on moving forward. The residence marked by Elias is the oldest on the block, walls warped by moisture, structure close to collapsing, but holding something that, to Mindtrace, is more dangerous than any leak. A huge table positioned at the center of the main room. Mark identifies the pattern before entering. The door is not broken, just resting against the frame. The ritual is about to begin, or has already begun. The air inside the house is dense, thick with suspended dust as if the place were breathing the past. The 8-seat table is there exactly as the old images suggested. 2 chairs already positioned with ritualistic precision. Empty plates, blank Polaroids waiting to be born. The light coming through the cracks forms narrow beams casting shadows that seem designed to frame someone. Someone who hasn't arrived yet or who is already there, hidden inside his own mind. Jay notices there are no victims present. That doesn't relieve anything, it only increases the danger. It means Elias is anticipating the scene, preparing the stage, the rehearsal before the capture, the moment in which he organizes his pain to repeat it in others. But something stands out. On the table, a Polaroid already developed, but incomplete. It doesn't show people. It doesn't show chairs. It shows the ruined wall of the house and within it, a distorted, smudged reflection where the photographer's silhouette should be. Elias is rehearsing the erasure of himself. Before the victims, before the full table, before the final family. Liz picks up the photo carefully, analyzing the smudge pattern. The gesture is identical to the previous scenes. There is no doubt, Elias is here, and he is terrified of his own existence. Mindtrace moves through the house, observing the environment as if it were an open mind. Everything is symbolic, everything autobiographical. Jay notices fresh footprints on the dust-covered floor, slow, dragging circular steps, as if someone had been walking in loops, lost inside his own psychological maze. The path leads to what used to be a bedroom. The door is slightly open. Liz doesn't touch the door. She simply observes. And she notices the door was opened from the inside recently. But there is no sound. No breathing, no movement, no pressure in the air. It is the silence of someone accustomed to disappearing, someone who has trained himself to be invisible. The confrontation happens without warning. A low voice, almost a whisper, echoes through the house. It is not aggressive. It is not threatening. It is fractured. You came to see the truth. The voice does not come from the bedroom. It comes from behind. Elias Hargrove is in the shadow between two structural pillars, almost blending into the darkness of the room. He doesn't try to run. He doesn't try to attack. He doesn't try to break Mindtrace's presence. He simply observes, but not with eyes. With a posture so empty it seems like a human reflection with no light. He holds a freshly developed Polaroid, still warm from the camera, but he doesn't look at it. He doesn't look at anything. Liz steps forward. She does not interrogate. She does not accuse. She does not demand confession. She does what Mindtrace always does when confronting broken minds. She describes what she sees. You erased yourself before erasing anyone else. The sentence is not judgment. It is a mirror. Elias does not react with anger. He reacts with a kind of internal pause, as if that were the first true sentence he has ever heard. Mark analyzes every micro-gesture. Elias holds the Polaroid like someone holding a piece of torn skin. His hand trembles, not from fear, but from emotional saturation. He is at the edge of his own ritual. For him, the fifth house is the final act, the conclusion of a work that never had a healthy beginning. Jay enters his mind through symbolic logic. You don't want to kill families. You want to end the lie they represent. Elias squeezes the Polaroid until it nearly bends, but he does not tear it, does not destroy it. Liz identifies the emotional key. You were trapped inside the picture they made of you, and you've been trying to erase a reflection that was never yours. Elias's breathing shifts for the first time. Small, but real. Mindtrace understands that the trigger for the final ritual was the gradual disappearance of his own face in public life. Elias no longer posted photos, no longer attended gatherings, no longer looked in mirrors. His social erasure preceded the victim's erasure. Liz confronts the internal truth. You were the fourth empty chair in your own family, but you don't have to keep being. This sentence breaks through his mental process. The ritual, which was about to restart, loses meaning. The empty chair stops being symbol and becomes open wound. The table is ready. The Polaroids are cut. The plates are aligned. The house waits. The ritual is seconds from completion. But Elias does not take the final step. He drops the Polaroid to the floor. The paper hits the wood with a fragile sound, the sound of something that has lost meaning. And he mutters something he never would have said before. "I didn't want anyone to see me." The sentence reveals everything. The crime was not exhibitionism. It was escape. It was disappearance. It was an attempt to erase himself through others. Mark approaches the table and shifts one of the chairs. It is the simplest gesture in the world, but psychologically, it is devastating for Elias. The ritual always relied on symmetry, on order, on control, on repetition. By breaking the geometry of the scene, Mark breaks the narrative that sustained the delusion. Elias, for the first time, loses his internal axis. He does not become violent. He does not try to restore the scene. He simply stops. His body loses its rigid posture. The empty gaze falls to the floor. His hand lets go of the Polaroid. He has no continuation, no more ritual. The confrontation ends not with shouting but with silence. The silence of a mind that has finally seen the truth. Not his version, the real one. The one he never managed to face. When Liz says, "It's over, Elias," he does not resist, does not question, does not run. He simply lets himself exist, for the first time without trying to erase anything. It is the deepest form of surrender, the acceptance that the ritual failed its emotional purpose. Because the purpose was never to destroy victims, it was to destroy himself. And Mindtrace, for the first time, sees Elias for what he truly is. A child who grew up inside a photograph that never fit. A man who tried to erase trauma through aesthetic composition. A photographer lost in the distorted reflection of his own past. The confrontation ends there. Not through force, but through symbolic dismantling. Part 9. The psychological confrontation in the fifth house does not close the case, it only shifts it into its most delicate stage. Mindtrace knows that capturing a ritualistic criminal is not just restraining a body, it is deactivating an internal narrative. Elias Hargrove does not try to flee, but that does not mean he is truly contained. His mind lives in transit between the past and the unfinished scene, between trauma and ritual, between erasure and revelation. Any abrupt rupture could reactivate the symbolic compulsion that brought him there. The moment Elias leaves the fifth house is heavy with silence. The air feels stuck to the walls, as if the structure itself were watching the end of a sick cycle. He walks slowly, short steps, without lifting his head. There is no physical tension, but there is a type of emotional collapse, the dissolution of a narrative that sustained him for years. Mark watches his posture, slumped shoulders, open hands, no muscular resistance. It is the posture of someone who is not being taken away, he is being removed from a scenario that no longer has purpose. Outside, the brightness is aggressive for Elias, who squints even without looking at anyone. It is not a reaction to light. It is a reaction to the world returning, to the world with eyes. Tactical teams, summoned by local police after the suspect was confirmed, surround the block. But Mindtrace prevents any hostile approach. Elias is taken out without handcuffs, not as a privilege, but as technique. Handcuffing him now would restore the feeling of theater. He would see himself as a captured character, reinforcing the distorted narrative that he is part of a grand performance. Liz chooses to preserve the internal dismantling. She walks beside him. She doesn't speak, doesn't confirm his arrest, doesn't offer explanations. Silence, in that moment, is more therapeutic than any word. Elias does not attempt eye contact, but that is expected. To look at someone would reconstruct the dynamic he spent his life trying to erase. When the perimeter gate opens for exit, something interesting happens. Elias hesitates, not out of fear of the police, but because of lost reference. The abandoned house represented his mind, and leaving it means abandoning the last symbolic version of his childhood. The unfinished table remains behind. The empty chair remains silent. The ritual dies there. The hesitation is brief but deep. A moment where the body seems unsure how to exist without a ritualistic stage around it. Jay notices and records mentally. He doesn't know how to live outside the stage he created. The tactical team, keeping distance, attempts to formally confirm his identity. He does not answer, does not recognize his own name, does not confirm, does not deny. Liz becomes the bridge. "Elias, you can come with me." The sentence is not a command, it is continuation, and that prevents his mind from returning to ritual state. He agrees to follow, not out of submission, but symbolic exhaustion. Final identification is done through fingerprints which match all manipulated Polaroids. The report confirms what Mindtrace already knew. The crime scenes are extensions of him. When Elias is placed in the vehicle, there is no physical restraint. But there is something stronger. The collapse of his internal ritualization. The cold seat, the narrow walls, the limited space. Nothing resembles the broad stage of the abandoned houses. He has no control over light, composition, or the position of those around him. There is no table, no chairs, no camera. He is directing nothing. His body curls into an almost fetal position, as if shrinking to fit inside his own emptiness. He does not cry, does not tremble, does not speak. He simply compresses himself. Mark describes mentally, "It's the final erasure. Now he's not the one wiping away eyes. The world is wiping away his scene." The drive to the department is silent. Liz rides beside him, observing the post-ritual behavior. Symbolic criminals often enter a state of disconnection after the interruption of a cycle. Elias seems shut off but not lost. He is conscious, but not reactive. He looks at his own hands. It is the first time he looks at anything since the confrontation. Liz knows how to interpret it. He is searching for the gesture of the smudge, the gesture that defined him, the gesture that gave meaning to his pain. But his hands are empty. No Polaroid, no fresh emulsion, no gaze to erase. He realizes the absence, and his internal world collapses. At the department, the processing must be different. Handcuffs are now used, but carefully, so as not to trigger symbolic responses. Elias does not resist. It is as if the metal touch simply confirms what he already knew, that his narrative is over. In the identification room, the official camera flash goes off. Elias flinches. It is his first strong physical reaction. The flash symbolizes the photograph he never got to control. It is not his camera, not his framing, not his light. He is being photographed, and that is, for him, a form of emotional death. Liz whispers, "This is the real image, the one you never allowed to exist." He doesn't answer. But something in him dissolves. Mindtrace decides to begin the interrogation in a non-traditional way. No direct questions, no demands, no accusations. Liz simply places on the table the Polaroid found in the house, the one showing only his blurred reflection. Elias looks. For the first time, he looks directly at his own trace. Jay carefully observes the micro-expression. It is as if Elias finally sees what he has tried to erase since childhood, not the reflection, but the emptiness of the reflection. He murmurs, "I tried to fix it." The sentence is not a confession. It is an emotional epitaph. Mark completes calmly, "You tried to fix an album that wasn't yours." Elias doesn't respond, but he lets his body sink into the chair as someone who finally accepts that the narrative cannot continue. The signature forms, fingerprints, booking, photosol are done in silence. The bureaucratic process, normally cold and mechanical, gains powerful symbolic weight. Each document is an official frame. Each record is an image he does not control. The arrest does not close the case, but it closes the work. And that is more devastating to him than any sentence. When the cell door closes for the first time, Elias does not look back. He simply sits in the corner back to the hallway as if posing for a picture no one will take. There is no table, no aligned chairs, no camera, no ritual, only the echo of retreating footsteps, and the metallic sound of the door, the last click of the album he tried to write with pain. Mindtrace watches him one final time before leaving. Liz summarizes what they all feel. He spent his whole life erasing gazes. Now it's his gaze that disappears. And with that, the capture is complete. Not through force, but through the end of the reflection. Part 10. When Mindtrace leaves the detention center that night, Cleveland is already beginning to breathe with less weight. Newspapers announce the capture, the streets recover their usual sounds, and the abandoned houses return to the silence they always had, now without assembled tables, without aligned chairs, without interrupted rituals. But for the team, the resolution is never just the final point of a case. It is a mirror turned toward the world, inviting reflection on what remains when the narrative falls apart. Liz, Jay, and Mark walk through the empty parking lot as if crossing a post-ritual territory. There is no urgency, no rush, only the deep understanding that no crime is born from nothing and no criminal emerges without roots. The story of Elias Hargrove is, at its core, the story of a broken image constructed in childhood, fragmented by contradictions, shaped by unrealistic expectations, slowly destroyed by the pressure to appear as something one never was. The reflection begins there, in the weight of appearances. Mindtrace knows we live in a time when image has replaced experience, when families smile for photographs that do not represent their real dynamics, when digital profiles create idealized versions of everyday life, when photography becomes proof of something that may never have happened. Elias grew up in that environment, not surrounded by monsters, but by rehearsed smiles. And that is exactly what fractured him, the contrast between what he saw in the photos and what he felt inside his home. The question the case leaves behind is profound. How many lives today are shaped by the obligation to appear? How many families perform happiness out of fear of revealing their flaws? How many people lose themselves trying to fit the frame they created? The answer does not absolve Elias, does not excuse him, but it reveals something bigger. He did not kill out of sadism, nor power, nor physical dominance. He killed to destroy a lie that haunted him his entire life. A lie that confused love with posing, family with stage, happiness with documentation. Jay, always analytical, reflects that the Polaroid, this simple, instant, imperfect technology, carried the most painful symbolism of the case. Not because it is a portrait, but because it is definitive. In a world where everything can be edited, adjusted, redone, enhanced, the Polaroid is an affront. It reveals what is, even when what is hurts. Elias erased eyes not to destroy people, but to destroy the gaze that, for him, always lied. He believed he was correcting the world, when in reality, he was correcting himself until he disappeared. Mark observes that the abandoned houses used in the rituals were not just settings. They were self-portraits, empty spaces, silent, filled with dead memory. They were metaphors for a childhood without real affection, without warmth, without stability. Elias turned ruins into studios because his mind was made of the same cracks. And in the center of those ruins, he placed tables that represented what he never had, a true seat at the family table. During the capture, when he left the fifth house, something symbolic occurred. For the first time, Elias left behind not just a setting but the narrative that kept him alive. The empty table remained. The solitary chair remained. He stepped away from the image he had spent his life trying to correct. Mindtrace closes the report with the reflection that guides the entire division. Violence does not emerge from darkness, but from the silence we allow to grow inside the image. And this case, like so many others, reminds us that danger does not reside only in extreme acts, but in the human inability to admit flaws, vulnerabilities, and intimate truths. When the facade becomes the priority, the person dissolves. When image is worth more than affection, the family becomes a stage. And when the world demands perfection, someone inevitably breaks. Elias broke. The victims broke because he broke. And the world, faced with this, must ask itself, how many masks are we still holding up before they too crack?